Uh-oh. Hi, everybody. I'm meteorologist Joe Chaffee, 9 a.m. here on September the 12th. Uh, that was my coffee pot. I think you might have heard burp. Let me just warn you ahead of time. I am getting a huge problem here with regards to the signal, and I'm not sure why and what's going on, but hopefully we will hold on to this. So if it looks a little jumpy this morning, please forgive me. While we have it, um, I am. We'll jump around. We'll get right to all this and start with the hurricane warnings that are up. And where is it? Where's my window box? I'm doing everything on the fly this morning. I got up a little bit late. All of this extra stuff has gotten me a bit on the sleepy side. My window capture now suddenly decides not to work. This is so. This is not good. All right, just bear with me 1 second. Let me fix this. This will just take me a second. I'll have to put up a new window capture, and that's easy enough. And okay, I think I might have it here now. Hang on 1 second. And here we go, getting closer. Yay! Got it. Okay, so now we can get going with this. Um, Hurricane, nothing has changed as far as the Hurricane Center is concerned with respect to the warnings. They still remain where they've been from Edisto Beach, north and east along the North Carolina coast, all the way up to Duck, North Carolina. We have hurricane watches that extend south of Edisto Beach past Charleston. And don't be shocked if that hurricane watch eventually winds up being upgraded to a hurricane warning. Up to the north, we have the hurricane watch from Duck, North Carolina to the North Carolina-Virginia border, and then tropical storm watches for a small portion of the southeast coast of Virginia. I want to just let me just make sure that that's not a tropical storm warning. They've got so many of these things up that it's hard to keep track with all of it. But that is a tropical storm warning north of Duck to the North Carolina-Virginia border, and a tropical storm watch for that area in Virginia. Okay, so let me just make sure that we've got this correct. The area from the tropical storm warning is from Duck, North Carolina to the Virginia border, and the tropical storm watch in effect from the Virginia border just slightly to the north of that to Cape Charles Light in Virginia. So as we said, nothing much has really changed. Nothing has really changed from that standpoint. I don't expect the Hurricane Center to really adjust this too much today, because a lot of what they're basing on that hurricane warning is the fact that the weather models continue to show this idea of Florence coming to almost a grinding halt along the Carolina coast, at least for a good 18 to 24-hour period, and then bringing it inland right into the South Carolina coast, not that far from Myrtle Beach. So this is going to be a long duration event. Make no mistake. When you have to sit something for a 24-hour or longer period, you're talking about a large stretch of area that's going to be pounded by nonstop rain. That, I think, at the end of the day, may wind up being the bigger problem here, and that is the rain and the excessive flash flooding that is going to occur out of this. Also, that's not to minimize the impact of the wind and the coastal flooding. Certainly don't want to do that, but I think it's, with the rain, when you're talking here about basically 24-hour increments, almost a day and a half to 2 days to go from one point to another, uh, that is that's a long, long time. And by the way, the lines that you see here, this is off the Hurricane Center's interactive tool, which is one of the interactive tools that they have, which is very useful. The timelines that you see here are telling us the arrival of gales to the coastline. So the Hurricane Center forecasting gales to reach the coastline by 8 a.m. Thursday. So this time tomorrow morning, fringe gales will be approaching for the Outer Banks, and by 8 p.m., some of those gales will have spread inland. That might be a bit rushing it slightly, but just by a couple of hours. So I'm not really going to quibble too much with it. The issue with the winds, the area of gales is expanding, and that is clear as the storm, is getting a bigger in size in terms of the geographic coverage. It usually happens with storms as they move northward. Let's look at the rainfall potential from the Hurricane Center, and this is another one that I think that is probably going to wind up having to be adjusted. This is courtesy of the WPC, the Weather Prediction Center. 7-day rainfall forecast totals in the purple exceeding 20 inches for the North Carolina coast from just east of Wilmington, actually just east of Jacksonville, North Carolina, and then extending southwestward from there to almost the border. I would say that this also will probably need adjusting. I think you're going to wind up expanding that area of purple northwestward into North Carolina and then southwestward into South Carolina. I think that the excessive rainfall here on the map is underdone from the standpoint of the numbers being shown. But look, here's the deal. If you want to look at this in a broad sense, you could certainly look at that area of 6 to 10 inches and say that that could wind up easily being double that, especially in local areas. So we get. I think the idea that there's going to be a very excessive rainfall event out of this is fairly clear for that entire area, and of course that is the biggest impact really for inland areas, and it's big an impact on the coast. The coast has the added issue of the wind and the tides, which is the next thing I want to do, which is to go to the other interactive tool. And this is where, by the way, again, let me remind everybody that the official websites are where you want to go for local information, especially if you're not, if you're not in the least bit weather savvy, you don't want to be fooling around with this. So please consult your local officials, your local National Weather Service office, which you can get to by just going to weather.gov, or the National Hurricane Center's website, nhc.noaa.gov. These maps are the official maps that I'm showing you. The maps that I'm going to show you later on, the weather models and the hurricane tracking model guidance, those are not maps that you should be using to make decisions. So on this interactive tool, we can actually take a look and see what the storm surge is forecast to be. We see the area of hurricane warnings. I'm pulling this up for the first time. It might be in the process of getting updated here because I'm not seeing what I should be seeing, and that is the surge forecast amounts. So it seems like we'll try this again a bit later on. It could be as a result of the fact that it hasn't been. Oh, okay, hang on. This is the storm surge watch and storm surge warning. There we go. That's a storm surge watch and storm surge warning. My fault. This is the interactive tool. Again, I apologize. I'm just kind of trying to get going here. It is. This is what happens when you wind up oversleeping by an hour and the coffee hasn't quite kicked in. And here we go. So when we take a look, and you can zoom in on this as tight as you'd like, The blue, the scale is on the bottom here, greater than 1 foot of surge above the ground. Yellow is 3, brownish is 6, and the red is 9. And here's the inundation is going to be especially great in the back bays and in the rivers that the tides run up into. And in and around New Bern, we're talking about 9 feet of storm surge. That is significant. And you can get actually as close as you'd like with this in terms of the geography, almost down to the street. The surge near the coastline, of course, on the bays in Albemarle and Pamlico Sound, quite significant, large areas of 6 foot or more tidal surge. That's water above the ground, and then pockets of 9 feet, and then that extends even further north. Lake Mamadiski. I hope I pronounced that correctly. You can see the surge in and around that area. And now, of course, they're the Outer Banks, and surges do occur 1 foot or more in parts of northeastern North Carolina and in southern Virginia. And to the south, we have some tidal surge issues in and around Wilmington, especially along the coast, where you've got areas of 6 to 9 feet right along the coastal communities in and around Wilmington. And that extends northward up the coast toward Jacksonville, which is inland. We can look at the surge there, and the surge with the waters in Jacksonville running 6 feet or more in some places. And then further south, we can go into closer to the South Carolina border. Let me widen out so I know where I am. Some surge being indicated in that area, but that's going to be on the other end of the storm, on perhaps the southern end of the storm, where the winds are more northwesterly, so the water will be blown out at a certain point. The surge will diminish as you go further south, but as the forecasts change, the maps will change. So you need to check this and recheck it as we watch the storm approach. You're going to see these tidal surges adjusting considerably. Okay, so far so good, and my stream health has improved, so that is a good thing. Here is Florence this morning. It hasn't really strengthened much overnight. The pressure has fallen a little bit, but the winds, official winds are 130 miles an hour. The Air Force plane, the last reconnaissance aircraft, did actually find 130 knots, which would be up at about 150 miles per hour. But when they adjust that, that was at flight level. So when they looked at that in the satellite presentation, they came down to 115. There's still time for this to do that one last burst of strengthening, but I don't really think it matters too much whether that happens or not. This is going to be a Category 4 hurricane as it nears the coast, and it's likely to probably weaken a bit before landfall because of the fact that it is going to slow down and stall. The European model, by the way, has been just absolutely great with this in terms of the consistency and also in terms of leading us down the path of a track that is going to wind up impacting areas further south and continuing to impact the areas, of course, that were originally forecast, which was the North Carolina coast. And if you're watching, you're watching from home with this, and weather is kind of a new thing for you. This is a great example of the fluidity of meteorology, which is, to me, has always been. It's not about being a quote inexact science, because I've always taken issue with that description. It's really a fluid science. It's a forecast of change, and it's a forecast of the change of the change, and staying ahead of that is a very, very formidable task. The hurricane intensity tracking models most of them have it bunched up as a Category 4, and you can see where the drop occurs. That's where you have either landfall or close to land. I would say that the models that slope down the fastest are the ones that show a clean landfall, while the ones that are linked to ones that show a clean are indicating that the model is just going to make a straight clean landfall and likely keep on moving, or at least moving very slowly inland, while the ones that have that more gradual decline are the ones that are probably indicating that we're going to see this thing slow down and stall. And as it gets closer to land, because while it's moving at 17 miles an hour now, if it were to keep moving at that speed, then I think you would see this go in as a Cat 4 or a strong Cat 3 for sure. But because it's slowing down and you're going to see this gradual interaction with the land of the circulation, that's going to start taking its toll on the strength. Slow, but it's going to be very, very slow, and it means a long duration event for coastal areas. The hurricane tracking models, you can see the shifting that's gone on and how clustered they are going toward the North Carolina coast, along or just inland, and then going in somewhere in the eastern part of the South Carolina coast, and then continuing west from there. By the way, I'll say this now, areas from that are outside any kind of warning area, okay? Any areas that are outside the warning area that we showed you earlier, which means there are no warnings north of any kind, north of the North Carolina Virginia border, and we have very little in terms of warnings from from the South Carolina border southward through for the Georgia coast. So let me put this into. Let me separate these now. The areas to the north. So from the Virginia, North Carolina border northeastward, the impacts from this storm, from the landfalling hurricane, will be very little on the southern end of that to nothing everywhere else. So if you're in Maryland, the Delmarva Peninsula, Delaware, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, southern New England, southeastern New York, which is that's a large part of my area that I cover on a daily basis. There is no impact from this. The weather that we are seeing from the landfalling hurricane, the weather that we're going to be seeing would have happened regardless of whether there was a hurricane making landfall or not. And in fact, it is quite likely that this weekend, the weather across the Northeast and the northern mid-Atlantic states will be quite nice from the standpoint of clouds and sunshine, and very little in the way of downpours, because we're going to have this big upper high protecting us. If you're south of the areas in South Carolina to the Georgia border and a little bit south of there, I'd want to be a little bit cautious because of the fact that the European model keeps trending a bit further to the south. So it's hard to fight it. It seems to be, when we've been watching this over the last few days, we've watched that model basically lead everybody along and lead all the other models along. The GFS, same idea, shift further south from the overnight to some degree, kind of held its own at 6Z. And the members are all very tightly clustered now. The Hurricane Center's forecast, actually, when you look at it, is fairly close to the GFS mean, that black line that you see. We've got a few of the members that take it down as far south as south of Charleston. So I think that's the risk, that you're going to wind up seeing this thing stall out and just drag itself southwestward. And that it gets pretty far to the south when this is all said and done. You know what? We'll come back to this. I want to just kind of stay on the same subject. So here we go. So here's the European from yesterday's map. So here's the initial from yesterday evening. This model comes out every 12 hours, so we don't have an in between like we do with some of the others. But aiming for the North Carolina coast by tomorrow evening. It's just south east of Wilmington, roughly at about 33.7 and 77.2 on the European, which is southeast of Wilmington by I don't know, about 60 or 70 miles. And from here, and we can't see the in between. That's 24 hours later. Okay, it barely moves 30 to 40 miles southwestward, and it's actually a distance offshore, far enough where the weakening would be rather insignificant. And it has it actually still offshore offshore Charleston before coming in on the South Carolina-Georgia border. Now, this may be too far south, okay? But again, I want to take notice of the fact that the European keeps doing this. So, but again, that may be too far south. The GFS is further north. We'll look at the GFS on this. This is going to be a nail biter for you folks on the South Carolina coastline. It's a real nail biter, and I think you need to really pay close attention to what's happening here. The maps are just a little bit slow to load, but here we go on the GFS. We are at this is Wednesday morning, so we are at present time here. Just checking to make sure that the maps are loading up okay on the screen. So you're seeing all this and making its move to the northwest, gets to just about to Wilmington, North Carolina. There's your stall. This is Friday morning, Friday afternoon, Friday night. It just sits there. Same spot. An absolute stall for 12 hours. Then, as the big upper high to the north builds, it starts to get nudged to the southwest and west, and it brings it in basically between Charleston and Myrtle Beach. That's where I'm kind of at with this. The European now might be a bit too far south. I can't completely discount it that we could see another model shift. The GFS has done 2 runs in a row with essentially the same track, and then brings it inland. The rainfall amounts on this model, again, and look for this to change and probably expand some southwestward. You also have to be careful with the model generation of the rainfall amounts, because the experience has told us that oftentimes these rainfall amounts are underdone by at least a factor, by at least 50%. So these numbers could be 50% higher. And the areas in the yellow and in the brighter yellow, if you look at the scale, are talking 12 to 24 inches. So this could easily be 2 feet plus of rain for this entire area, which would be record flooding. And it's the stall that is doing it. The stall is such an hurricanes are bad enough, obviously, when they're coming in and moving along. But when you have something like this where it stalls out, the flash flooding could be excessive. Could be an understatement. Okay, I'm not one that likes to throw this stuff around, the words around. So I want to be, I'm always trying to be a little bit cautious with that. But in an instance like this, where you're seeing the models all consistently showing this idea of a very, very long duration event, if you're on the coast, it's the wind and the rain, so you get the double hit. Inland, of course, there are going to be strong winds. If you're just inland, the further inland you go, it's more of a rain event than anything else. And especially as you go north and west, the purples are all up to about 6 inches. So that could easily be up to 9 or 12 inches instead. We'll look at the actual surface map. Now, here's the conundrum with regards to the longer term, and everybody's on this at the same time, so the site is very slow to load. So here's how it looks on the surface map. So we know that it's coming in from offshore. We just showed you the track, but you can see how the GFS shows that heavy rain area there, and that's in the in the yellows and reds. You're talking about 6 to 10 inch rainfalls in 6-hour increments in some places. I mean, that's monumental. And the low goes into western North Carolina, up into the west side of the Appalachians, and then goes northeastward. So much of the remnant rains here, if this is correct, would go west of the mountains. And yeah, there will be some rains across Virginia, Western Virginia, and West Virginia, but the bigger rains are likely to be on west of the mountains if the GFS is right, and that is a big if. There's another cold front that's sweeping southward from Canada. As the ridge breaks down, it's going to be the natural tendency for this to want to go northward. So the northern extent of the rains, you do have some 2-inch plus rains being indicated for the central Appalachians, and then even higher amounts into northeastern Ohio, northwestern PA, and southwestern New York. But I want to be careful here because the model might be getting that middle part wrong where it has less. West of the Appalachians is a bit more of an of a for the East anyway. It's a bit more of an ideal solution, but there's a wrench in this equation because the European has different ideas on what it wants to do with this. And this is a good time, I think, that we'll start to look at the upper air a bit more. If you've been here every day for the last few days, you know the drill with regards to how this is playing out in terms of the upper air. You've got this big ridge off the Atlantic coast that's got the storm cradled around it, and then the ridge starts to weaken in the middle a bit and actually splits in two, with one upper high off the Atlantic coast, another upper high centered near St. Louis, and there's actually a third upper high near Nova Scotia. This is the stalling is because Florence is basically in a land of no flow. The stronger westerly flow is displaced so far to the north. The ridges are basically holding this thing in place. Then the upper ridge builds from the Atlantic side and from the Midwest, and it builds across the top, which forces this thing to go southwest and west. And by the way, if you look out east of Florence, by the time we get to Sunday, there's a low out here, and this is a system that's out in the central Atlantic right now that is forecast to drop southwestward, and the Hurricane Center actually indicates that this has a possibility of becoming a subtropical or a tropical storm. And it's actually wrapped inside the broader circulation of Florence. They're kind of moving together in tandem. But the European has a different idea in that the trough in the north basically kind of bypasses it. The representation of Florence here is in eastern North Carolina. This is in the middle part of next week. And then it heads to the coast and kind of drops back southwestward, believe it or not. So when you look at this on the surface, and I'm not forecasting this, I'm just showing you what one of the model possibilities are. And we'll follow it better on the surface though, because you can actually see what happens. But there you go. There's Florence near the coast, coming in, swirling up and around. Now this is if this situation plays out where the surface flow moves like this, you could certainly wind up, instead of going up the west side of the Appalachians and it keeps on moving, for areas in West Virginia, Western Virginia, Eastern Kentucky, Eastern Tennessee, and of course the Western Carolinas. This is a big rain problem. This is going to be for much bigger rain problems for your area. So you need to pay close attention, particularly the areas in Western Virginia and Eastern West Virginia, which have had a phenomenal amount of rain, as we all know, over the summer months. Now there's that low. This is the remnant low of Florence at this time. Actually drops back into the coastal waters of the Carolinas. If it winds up missing the trough, you know what? Nothing would shock me. Okay, let's put it that way. Nothing would shock me with all of this. And the fact that we've seen the models really behave so well lately when it comes to this particular storm, you have to really admit, even if you're a skeptic of all this stuff, and it's always wise to have skepticism when it comes to the weather models, because they can lead you oftentimes they can lead you down roads that get you into trouble with respect to a forecast. Just want to see, oh good, I do have that satellite here, so let me bring that up. So we're watching the loop of Florence going to the east there. You can see it there. I'm sorry, I'll make it a bit bigger. And of course we're going now over toward the visible, and we're not quite there yet in terms of the time frames. There's a little bit of a lag, but when we look at Florence on this view, the presentation of the storm looks very good. The eye is very well defined. You have that symmetrical look, although it does look as if it's eaten away just a little bit on the southwest side, but it's every bit of a Category 4 hurricane, no doubt about it. And in terms of the distance here to the Carolina coast, I can make this show you the western flank. So You can see where the coastline is as it just on this west-northwest motion that continues unabated. There's nothing that's stopping it at the moment. It's moving at that 17-mile-an-hour rate. But when that upper ridge collapses, look for that to start the slowdown and the stall. Okay, on the boards with everybody. We've got a nice crowd this morning, so we can talk for a little bit. Uh, I'm going to run back to the beginning. Collective hello to everybody, because I can't say hello when the crowd is too big to you individually. By the way, just really quickly, let me just show you. Let me just do a shameless plug, okay? But for those of you who are really interested in weather, I think that you might enjoy my platform that is on Patreon. You can support my channel and all the things that I'm doing, website posts, videos that are exclusive to Patreon members. It just starts at $2 a month. And I do daily live streams every day if you're new to this channel. So this is a great way to support what I'm doing, basically for a cup of coffee once a month. And I appreciate those of you who have gone on that. Some of you that are on it and are on here have said some very nice things about what I'm doing, and you get a lot of exclusive posts on there that are directed just to you. Plus, you get to, if you want to talk to me, there's a messaging mode in there, and I'm very good about responding to my messages. So it's a good tool and a good thing for you weather watchers who like what I do, and I appreciate that. I can just show it to you really fast, and then we'll go back to what we've been doing. So this is what it looks like on the website. So take a look if you're interested. And again, thank you very much for those of you who have done so, and those of you who might consider doing so. I appreciate it. Okay, back to the boards. Back to your question. Let me get rid of the Patreon platform here as soon as it lets me, and voila. Okay, so make it a little bigger so I can read your posts. That high, Joe Garcia, is very strong. Yes, this is all all really been about the ridge of high pressure. That is really the driving force here, and the lack of any kind of trough to the west of the storm to bring it up the East Coast is keeping my area protected. And I'm actually in your area because you are on Long Island, and you mentioned that we have the sun has been not around very much lately. Actually, in Suffolk County yesterday, I will tell you that from my house east, it was partly to mostly sunny for a good part of the afternoon, and temperatures reached up into the low 80s while everybody else stayed in the 70s. So I had a little bit of dry air that came in from the east. A lot of the cloud action in situations like this, the eastern part of Long Island oftentimes winds up breaking out into sunshine, and everybody else sits in cloud cover. What effect did DC and Maryland from divide the question, Mario Piccarello, into two sections. The land from the landfalling hurricane for DC and Maryland, the impact is near zero. Whether there's going to be any impact later on from the remnant rains early next week is a big question. That remains on the table. Cynthia Guignaudas, nice to see you here. Good morning. Diane, you're quite welcome. Yeah, I've been just trying to make sure I hit my times. I've got everything scheduled in my head about what I have to do and when I have to do it, and work my regular job in between. And so far, it seems to have worked, except for the fact that I did oversleep this morning by about an hour. So it threw a slight monkey wrench into things. Mary Beth Woolley, welcome. Praying for everyone's safety. My concern isn't the nuclear plants. If they go, land and waters are contaminated and doomed. This is beyond frightening. Stay safe and get out. I got to tell you, I was thinking about this morning, Mary Beth, and when we went through Hurricane Sandy, that was the one instance where I did not want to work on TV because that would have taken me away from my home and my family. And it was the one time I thought that it was a good idea for me to stay home, and I'm glad I did. I don't live near the South Shore of Long Island. I'm actually about 9 miles inland, so coastal flooding was not an issue for me. And I'm thinking back to the experience of that afternoon, and particularly that night when Sandy made landfall nowhere near here, when it made landfall along the central New Jersey coast near Seaside Heights, Seaside Park, Toms River. Uh, we had what we experienced here was not much in the way of rain, but it was unrelenting wind. And I could hear my house moaning in the wind with gusts to 60, 70, 80 miles an hour. And it was unrelenting for hours. I have to tell you, I was a little bit concerned and distraught. Uh, it, there was a moment where I thought, is my house getting ready to just to blow up? I don't know how someone, uh, how does someone sit through a hurricane when the wind is at 100 miles or higher and unrelenting for hours and hours is kind of beyond me. I don't understand the logic well, I do get there's we all are attached to our homes and where we live and everything that goes with it, especially if you've been in your house for many, many years. There is an obvious emotional attachment to it. And it's a very hard thing to say, I'm going to leave you. It's like you're leaving a person behind. You're saying, I'm going to leave you behind to protect myself. But look, in the end of the day, everything in terms of your material things and your structures and everything else that you have, um, you can replace a lot of that stuff. The memories, obviously, you can't. So you try to, protect that and keep that stuff protected, obviously. But you certainly can replace all your things. Uh, you can't replace you and if a human being gets broken, tough to fix sometimes in many instances, and lives are first and foremost. Just try and remember that. I don't know. I think if it was me and I were living in the Carolina coast and they said to evacuate, knowing what I know as a professional, I think I think I would go. I can't make decisions for everybody, obviously. Everybody has to decide on their own, and hopefully this turns out to be um, less than what the potential is. Um, Mr. G. Loom, the North Pole it keeps on melting, so the hurricanes will be bigger and bigger. That has nothing to do with it. Just so you know, um, that is and that's and your assertion of the this is happening all over the world. You're seeing very big hurricanes. I don't know what you mean by big hurricanes. If you're talking about wind, if you're talking about geographic size of these storms or not, but actually the amount of hurricane activity worldwide hasn't really changed very much over the last number of decades, and that is a fact, and not quite, not. I don't think there's a firm, complete understanding about what's going on with respect to hurricane activity across the Atlantic and Pacific. There are many other factors in play. Remember, too, by the way, that hurricanes provide a function in the atmosphere in that they redistribute heat. We get excess heat build up in the summer months, and that has to be released. And That's how the atmosphere does it. It releases the energy in the form of tropical storms and hurricanes. It's a bit of an extreme way of doing it, but that's what it does. The winter storms serve a function to redistribute cold in the winter time so that we don't have all the have cold air concentrated in one particular area. It's all about trying to achieve some sense of balance in the atmosphere across the world, and the atmosphere is constantly moving chess pieces around in order to do that. Mad Squirrel, late to the show. Welcome aboard. wanted to ask, went through Andrew, family in North Carolina. Is the flooding the greatest threat from Florence in such a massive storm? Mad Squirrel, where in North Carolina? Because that is going to make a difference. Um, I think if you're on the coast, you have the double-edged sword. The wind is going to be bad and the rain is going to be bad. If you're inland, the further inland you are, it becomes less of an issue. The wind becomes a less of an issue, and the rain becomes the biggest issue. But either way, wherever it is, this is a problem. And even for the coastal areas, eventually the wind will probably start to subside some, and you're going to be left with waves. Scott Briller, as far as the African waves, tropical waves moving offshore, I think after Helene, which is way out in the Atlantic and is not going to be a factor here at all, I think what you're going to see is after we get through the middle part of and latter part of next week, when all these storms that are running around disappear, you're going to probably see the atmosphere take it down a couple of notches, and it'll relax for a little bit. I would expect that we would probably see another round of tropical storm or hurricane development in early October. But whether it's this was a pretty explosive period of development. I wouldn't think that you would see something like this, where all of a sudden you've got 3 storms on the map and the potential for 2 others. But you certainly might see them pop up one at a time. Yeah, I think we're going to get a little bit of a break, at least from what I'm seeing at the moment. Florence has not weakened, quote unquote, weakened quite a bit. Bobby Livingsworth. It's actually held its own quite well. There hasn't really been that much change in the intensity. It's at about 130 miles an hour. You could have made an argument that the Hurricane Center, based on the reconnaissance data, could have kept it a little higher, but 130 kind of looked like a fair number. It's still a Category 4 hurricane, and a dangerous one at that. You know what? That actually reminds me at this point. Why don't we check this? It might be a new. I didn't really look at what the reconnaissance aircraft schedule was with this. So why don't we take a look to see if we've got the plane in there, and maybe it can give us a clue. Okay, we have actually a plane flying into Isaac at the moment. We can take a look at that, and Isaac is weakened. The lowest pressure, it's made a center pass, the lowest pressure at 1,007 millibars. And if you look at the wind barbs, you've got one wind barb showing 45 to 50 knots, and all the other ones, a large band of winds in the darker greens at 34 to 40 knots and 40 to 45. So, I mean, it looks like this is certainly this is a tropical storm, and it looks a bit weaker than what was on the advisory. And here is mission 11 into Florence, and this is, just want to check the time. So we have one right now going on. So there's your pressure, 945, 948. So it's kind of fluctuating. There might be another eye wall replacement cycle getting underway. And when we look at the winds, certainly every bit of up to 113. I see a little bit of that salmon color, which is 113 to 137 knots on the east side. You see where the plane icon is, pointing to the southeast, pointing toward the lower right. That is the path. If you follow it from the lower left and just run up to the northeast and then go back west, this is how the plane flies through these hurricanes. And it makes a pass through the center. So each time it passes through the center, we get the next point, and you see the motion of the hurricane over the past couple of hours. The motion, looks like the center is at 29.6, 29.7 north, and 71 west. So it actually made it. This was one of the hard hurdles that I was looking at a couple of days ago, was to see this hurricane reach 70 degrees west before it got to 30 degrees north. That was a signal for me that a landfall was imminent for the southeast coast, and the hurricane has done that and it wasn't even close. So this is also, by the way, if you think back to last year, very interesting. If you think back to last year, how models had to adjust with all the storms that we had by being further west and south with every run. And apparently, I don't know, maybe that's something that's now, that maybe that error is now built into some of the global models with the upgrades that they've done, where we seem to be getting these west-south adjustments on a fairly routine basis with some of these storms. Not all of them, but a good amount of them. So that's an interesting fact that I'm going to bring up to one of my weather buddies who's into this, into this sort of stuff, and may have a better answer to it than I do. Okay, so you know what? Let's wrap it up at this point. Once again, just want to remind everybody, for those of you who want more on Florence and the other storms that are running around. Plus, we take a look at all the local weather that happens in the eastern Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York City, Long Island, Connecticut, southern New England. You can sign up to my Patreon page. The link I just put up in the chat, and that's what it looks like. There's an app that goes with this, so you can pull up my platform at any time, and you'll get notifications when new posts are on. You can message me, and I can answer your questions and get into weather conversations whenever you'd like. And it starts at $2 a month. And for those of you who have considered that, I really do appreciate it greatly. Now, as far as the schedule is concerned for later today, we can certainly set that schedule now, as I have got a pretty good idea of how my day is going to go. So we'll have the next YouTube live stream tonight at 7 p.m. I'll try and get a guest on. Maybe he can to lend perspective on what's happening. So 7 p.m. here on YouTube. The Joe and Joe Weather Show on Facebook with my colleague Joe Rayo. That airs at 9:15 Eastern Time on my Facebook page, Meteorologist Joe Chaffee, or you can watch it later on Joe Rayo's Facebook page, Joe Rayo Weather. And that will also be uploaded to Patreon and to YouTube in case you don't have Facebook. That is really about it. We also have to mention very quickly that we are also part of the Amazon Services LLC Associates Program, which is an affiliate advertising program designed to provide a means for this channel to earn fees by linking to Amazon.com and affiliated sites. So if you shop on Amazon and use the link that's on the descriptor to this video or the live stream, you get your stuff at Amazon prices. Amazon throws me back some coin, so I can get myself a cup of coffee and a little bit of breakfast every once in a while, and everybody's happy. Thank you for those of you who have used it. Okay, have a great day. Be safe. Those of you who are in the hurricane warning area, pay attention to your local officials, and please remember not to use the maps that you've seen here as tools for making decisions. You want to go to your local National Weather Service website at weather.gov or the National Hurricane Center at nhc.noaa.gov or your local governments in your local counties. Have a great day. We will see you later.